If you could hear what the narcissist really feels after betraying you when someone betrays you, especially a narcissist, it feels like the ground beneath you shatters, not just because of their actions, but because of the cruel mask they wear so effortlessly. But what if you could hear the truth behind that mask? What if you could glimpse the storm raging inside them after they've torn trust apart? The reality is, beneath their cold exterior lies a fractured soul wrestling with fear, shame, and emptiness they dare not admit. Their betrayal is not just a wound inflicted on you, but a silent scream of their own brokenness. Today, we will uncover the hidden feelings they carry, the feelings they refuse to show, and find strength in understanding the real battle that follows their darkest moments. Betrayal is the loudest cry of a wounded soul masked behind a facade of control. Betrayal is one of the most painful experiences we endure as human beings, but when it comes from a narcissist, it carries a unique and haunting weight. To truly understand the betrayal by a narcissist, we must first understand that their actions are never just about you. They are the loudest cry of a wounded soul, a soul that desperately tries to hide its pain behind a carefully constructed facade of control, superiority, and invincibility. The narcissist's world is built on illusion, an illusion that they are untouchable, perfect, and in control of every situation and every person around them. Yet, beneath this polished surface lies deep insecurity and a fragile sense of self that is constantly threatened by vulnerability or exposure. The betrayal you feel is, in many ways, the expression of their own inner chaos, a chaos they cannot face or admit, so they project it outward. When a narcissist betrays, it is often not a sudden explosion but a calculated move, a weapon wielded to maintain dominance or fill a void inside themselves. Their need for control is so intense that when they lose it, or even fear losing it, they lash out in ways that leave you reeling. But this betrayal is not just an attack on you, it is an unspoken scream for help from within their shattered world. They betray because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of feeling weak, vulnerable, or insignificant. Their betrayal masks a desperate attempt to cover the cracks of their own broken identity. They try to control you, to manipulate your emotions, to bend reality to their favor, because to do otherwise would be to admit their own helplessness. And admitting helplessness feels like death to their carefully maintained self-image. What most don't see is the deep suffering beneath the narcissist's actions. Their betrayal is a form of self-betrayal, a rejection of their own pain, fears, and insecurities. They turn their gaze outward to protect themselves from looking inward. It's easier to betray another than to confront the truth about who they really are, a scared, lost individual fighting to survive emotionally. They cloak themselves in arrogance and cruelty to avoid the unbearable vulnerability of admitting weakness. Yet, every act of betrayal is a silent confession of this hidden turmoil. It is a cry that they cannot voice openly because it would shatter their fragile facade. For you, the one who is betrayed, this truth can be difficult to grasp. The pain of betrayal feels like a personal attack on your worth, your trust, and your very sense of reality. But understanding that the narcissist's betrayal stems from their own brokenness does not excuse their behavior, it explains it. It lifts the heavy burden of self, blame, and confusion from your shoulders, and places the source of the chaos where it belongs, inside their unresolved wounds. Recognizing this allows you to see beyond the surface cruelty to the tragic self-deception that fuels it. It gives you clarity and, ultimately, power to stop internalizing their damage as your fault, and power to reclaim your own healing journey. It is important to remember that the facade of control maintained by the narcissist is just that, a facade. It is not a fortress built on strength, but a fragile house of cards balanced on fear and insecurity. Each act of betrayal, each manipulation, chips away at this fragile structure, revealing glimpses of their vulnerability. They fear exposure more than anything because it would mean facing the emptiness inside. This fear drives them to betray and hurt others before others can hurt them. The narcissist's betrayal is a preemptive strike, a twisted form of self-preservation that only deepens the wounds on both sides. Your journey after betrayal is not just about recovering from their actions, but also about seeing this complex dynamic with clarity and compassion. Compassion not for the betrayal itself, but for the brokenness that fuels it. When you understand that behind every act of cruelty lies a frightened soul trying to survive, you begin to release the heavy chains of anger, confusion, and pain. You stop chasing answers that may never come and instead focus on your own restoration. You no longer need to decode their behavior or wonder what they really feel, because you know it is tied to their struggle, not your worth. In this light, betrayal becomes a profound lesson. It teaches you about the limits of control, both theirs and yours. The narcissist's desperate need for control is a warning sign of what happens when someone refuses to face their pain and chooses to hurt others instead. Your healing is your rebellion against this destructive cycle. It is a declaration that you will not be defined by their betrayal, but by your strength to rise above it. This strength grows not by trying to change or fix the narcissist, but by understanding the nature of their wound and refusing to carry it as your own. So, when you feel the sting of betrayal, remember this. It is not just a personal attack. It is a reflection of a deeper wound inside the betrayer, a wound hidden beneath layers of pride and control. To heal, you must look beyond the surface and reclaim your power, knowing that the loudest cries of a wounded soul will never silence the voice of your own resilience. What they hide is not strength, but a fragile fear of being truly seen and exposed. Behind the grand illusion of confidence and power that a narcissist projects, there exists a fragile fear so profound that it governs every thought, word, and action they take. What they hide is not genuine strength, but a trembling vulnerability, a deep-seated terror of being truly seen, understood, and exposed for who they really are. This fear is the unseen prison that binds them, dictating their need to control, manipulate, and dominate others as a shield against their own internal chaos. The mask they wear, so carefully crafted, is designed to protect this vulnerability at all costs. To look beneath that mask is to glimpse the raw, trembling core of a human being desperate to keep their true self hidden, afraid that if the world ever sees them clearly, they will be rejected, abandoned, or destroyed. This fear of exposure is not simply about being physically seen, it's about being emotionally and psychologically vulnerable. For a narcissist, vulnerability is synonymous with weakness, and weakness threatens their entire identity. Their sense of self is so fragile that it cannot withstand genuine scrutiny or honest reflection. If others saw beyond the facade, they would witness not a person of power, but a person crippled by insecurity, shame, and deep loneliness. This is why narcissists go to such great lengths to control the narrative, to dictate how others perceive them, to rewrite history in their favor, and to silence any voices that challenge their constructed reality. The terror of being exposed drives them to betray, manipulate, and deceive because maintaining the illusion is the only way they know to survive. The irony is striking. What appears as arrogance and bravado is actually a desperate defense mechanism against the paralyzing fear of being unmasked. Every boast, every act of grandiosity, every attempt to dominate a conversation or relationship is a calculated effort to distract from their own insecurity. Beneath their loud exterior lies a fragile self that trembles with the fear that others will see the emptiness they feel inside. They fear the rejection that comes with being truly known because they have been deeply wounded, often in ways that go back to their childhood, where love and acceptance were conditional or absent. This early emotional neglect or trauma creates a fissure in their soul, a wound that never fully heals and shapes their desperate need to control how others see them. In this context, betrayal becomes a tool, a weapon used not just against others, but against the terrifying vulnerability they feel within themselves. When they betray trust, it is often an act of preemptive self-protection. They strike first because they fear being struck down. They sabotage relationships before someone else can expose their flaws, weaknesses, or mistakes. This betrayal is not about you. It is about their frantic attempt to shield their fragile ego from the devastating pain of exposure. The pain they cause is a reflection of the pain they hide. Their actions scream, "Don't look too closely, or you'll see the brokenness I cannot face." For the person on the receiving end, this hidden fear can be baffling and infuriating. You might wonder how someone so seemingly confident can behave with such cruelty or indifference. But understanding that their behavior is rooted in fear changes everything. It lifts the confusion and reveals the narcissist as a deeply scared individual who has mistaken their fear for strength. This knowledge does not excuse their actions, but offers a vital key to your own healing. When you realize that their betrayal and manipulation come from a place of profound fear, you stop personalizing their cruelty. You no longer see yourself as the cause or the problem, but as a witness to their struggle. This shift in perspective allows you to reclaim your power and begin to heal from the wounds they left behind. Moreover, this fear of exposure traps narcissists in a cycle of loneliness and isolation. Because they cannot allow themselves to be truly known, they push others away even as they crave connection. Their relationships are often superficial and transactional, built on control rather than genuine intimacy. This isolation deepens their fear and perpetuates their need to maintain the facade. It is a tragic cycle. The more they fear being seen, the more they hide, and the more they hide, the more isolated and broken they become. Betrayal is one of the many ways this cycle plays out, a desperate act to keep others at a safe distance. Understanding this dynamic is essential for anyone trying to make sense of a narcissist's behavior. Their strength is an illusion, a fragile armor that can never truly protect them from the pain inside. The true battle they face is not with you or anyone else, but with their own fear of being exposed. And because this battle is internal and deeply personal, it is often invisible to the outside world. They fight it alone, behind the mask they refuse to remove. Their betrayal is a symptom of this fear, a defense mechanism that ultimately serves only to deepen their isolation and pain. For you, recognizing this fear offers a way to detach from the emotional chaos they create. It allows you to see their actions not as personal attacks, but as reflections of their inner turmoil. This clarity is empowering because it frees you from the need to fix, justify, or make sense of their behavior. Instead, you can focus on your own healing and growth, building a life where your worth is not determined by their fear or betrayal. You can set boundaries, protect your heart, and move forward with the knowledge that their fear is not your burden to carry. In the end, what the narcissist hides is not strength, but a fragile fear of being truly seen and exposed, a fear so powerful it drives them to betray, manipulate, and control. But you, who have faced their betrayal, have the power to break free from this fear-based cycle. You can choose to no longer be trapped by their illusion of strength and instead embrace your own truth and resilience. The path to healing begins when you stop trying to penetrate their facade and start nurturing your own authentic self, unafraid to be seen and loved for who you truly are. Their regret is silent, drowned beneath the armor of denial and self-justification. Regret is often seen as the natural human response to betrayal, a painful acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a step toward healing and reconciliation. But with a narcissist, regret is a rare and silent specter, almost always hidden beneath layers of denial and self-justification. Their regret doesn't manifest as genuine remorse. Instead, it is buried deep within the fortress of their ego, drowned out by the relentless noise of excuses, blame shifting, and rationalizations designed to protect their fragile self-image. This silence is not because they do not feel regret at all, but because their fear of vulnerability and exposure is so intense that they cannot allow themselves to admit any fault, even to themselves. In this way, their regret becomes a ghost invisible, inaudible, and inaccessible to those who seek accountability or healing. When a narcissist betrays, the natural human expectation is that they will feel some sorrow, some remorse for the damage they have caused. But instead, what you often encounter is an impenetrable wall of denial. They refuse to acknowledge their role in the betrayal, insisting that they were justified, misunderstood, or even wronged themselves. This denial is not just a defense mechanism, it is the core of their survival strategy. To admit regret openly would mean to expose their flaws and weaknesses, and for a narcissist, such exposure threatens the very foundation of their identity. They are trapped in a cycle where accepting regret would mean confronting their own brokenness, a confrontation they desperately avoid. This denial creates a toxic environment where healing becomes nearly impossible because the truth remains unspoken and the wound unacknowledged. Alongside denial comes a powerful wave of self-justification. The narcissist rewrites the narrative, convincing themselves and others that their betrayal was necessary, deserved, or even noble in some distorted way. They blame external factors, their victims, or circumstances beyond their control to absolve themselves of responsibility. This self-justification is not merely a lie told to others. It is a lie they tell themselves repeatedly until it becomes a second reality. The mind of a narcissist constructs a fortress of rationalizations that shields them from the painful truth of their actions. This fortress keeps the door to genuine regret firmly locked, ensuring that their conscience remains untroubled by guilt or remorse. It is a self-preservation tactic, but one that comes at the cost of their own emotional growth and the possibility of authentic connection. For those betrayed, the absence of visible regret can be deeply confusing and painful. The expectation of remorse, of an apology that acknowledges the harm done, is a natural human desire. When this is not met, it leaves a void filled with anger, hurt, and disbelief. You might ask yourself, how can someone hurt me so deeply and not feel sorry? The answer lies in understanding the narcissist's internal struggle. Their regret is not absent because they are heartless. It is silent because they are terrified. Terrified that admitting regret will lead to rejection, humiliation, and the collapse of their carefully built identity. This silence is a form of emotional self-defense that shields them from the pain of accountability, but leaves their victims grappling with unresolved wounds. The silent regret of a narcissist also speaks to a profound emotional disconnection. Because they cannot face their own faults honestly, they remain disconnected from their feelings in a way that blunts empathy and compassion. Genuine regret requires the capacity to feel deeply, to understand the pain inflicted on another, and to accept responsibility. The narcissist's armor of denial and self-justification blocks this process. Their emotional world is often superficial, centered on maintaining appearances rather than engaging with the messy reality of human emotions. This disconnection is why their regret is not a healing bomb, but a hidden, unresolved tension that festers beneath the surface. This dynamic has far-reaching consequences for healing after betrayal. Without acknowledgement of regret, the possibility of reconciliation or closure becomes remote. The betrayed are left to navigate their pain alone, often replaying the betrayal repeatedly in their minds, searching for answers or signs of remorse that never come. The narcissist's silence on regret creates a chasm that cannot be bridged by words or apologies. It forces the betrayed to find their own path to healing, one that does not rely on the narcissist's validation or change. This path is difficult but necessary, a journey of reclaiming self-worth, setting boundaries, and learning to trust again despite the absence of external remorse. Moreover, the narcissist's silent regret is a warning about the limits of expecting change from them. True remorse involves humility and vulnerability, qualities that threaten the narcissist's sense of control and superiority. Their inability to express regret openly is not a sign that they do not feel any internal conflict, but a signal that their defense mechanisms are too entrenched. Attempting to force or demand their regret often results in further denial, blame, or even increased manipulation as they fight to protect their ego. Recognizing this can save you from repeated cycles of hope and disappointment. It empowers you to shift your focus away from trying to elicit their regret and toward nurturing your own healing. In understanding the silent regret of a narcissist, you gain a clearer picture of the emotional landscape you are navigating. You see that behind their betrayal lies not only a lack of accountability, but also a deep and tragic incapacity to confront their own truth. This incapacity is as much a prison for them as their betrayal is a wound for you. Their regret is a ghost haunting the corridors of their mind, locked away by the bars of denial and self-justification. But your freedom does not depend on their regret or remorse. It depends on your courage to release the past, reclaim your dignity, and build a future unshackled by their silence. Healing from the betrayal of a narcissist means accepting that their regret may never be voiced, and that their silence is not a reflection of your worth or the reality of the pain caused. It means finding strength in your own truth and compassion for yourself when the other's conscience remains locked behind an impenetrable wall. Your peace comes not from their regret, but from your ability to forgive, not to excuse, but to free yourself from the grip of their betrayal. This forgiveness is an act of liberation, a declaration that your life will no longer be held hostage by the silent ghosts of their hidden remorse. In their heart, the betrayal is not just of you, but a betrayal of their own broken identity. When we speak of betrayal, we often focus solely on the harm inflicted upon the victim, the broken trust, the shattered promises, the deep wounds left behind. But in the heart of a narcissist, betrayal carries a far more complex and painful meaning. Their act of betrayal is not simply an external assault on another person. It is also an internal fracture, a profound betrayal of their own broken identity. Beneath the surface of their manipulations, lies, and cruel actions, there exists a self that is fragmented, fragile, and wounded, a self that is continuously betrayed by its own denial, fears, and desperate attempts to maintain an illusion of wholeness and control. Understanding this internal betrayal within the narcissist offers a crucial lens to see the tragedy that unfolds not only for those they harm, but also for themselves. At the core of every narcissist is a fractured identity, an identity shaped by deep wounds, often rooted in childhood, neglect, abandonment, or emotional trauma. These early experiences create a crack in the foundation of their self-worth, a sense of emptiness that gnaws at their soul. But unlike healthy individuals who might confront and heal their pain, the narcissist chooses denial and distortion as survival mechanisms. They build a false self, a grandiose persona designed to hide their vulnerability and convince the world, and themselves, that they are strong, worthy, and invincible. This false self is not just a mask, it becomes a prison that confines them, forcing them to live inauthentic lives, disconnected from their true feelings and needs. When they betray others, they also betray this true self, further deepening the divide within. The betrayal they enact on others is often a reflection of the betrayal they enact on themselves. By engaging in deceit, manipulation, and cruelty, they deny their own pain and vulnerability, pushing away the parts of themselves they fear most. Every lie they tell is a betrayal of their own truth. Every manipulation is a rejection of their authentic self. In this way, their external betrayal is a mirror of an internal conflict, a struggle between the false self they have constructed and the real self they refuse to acknowledge. This internal battle is exhausting and destructive, creating a cycle of self-sabotage that is often invisible to those around them but devastatingly real within. This broken identity also explains why narcissists often seem so disconnected from the consequences of their betrayal. Because they are not fully in touch with their own emotions or truths, they cannot fully grasp the pain they inflict on others. Their actions are often automatic defenses rather than conscious choices. They betray not out of malice alone, but out of a desperate need to protect their fragile sense of self from collapse. They fear exposure more than anything because to be exposed would mean confronting the void within the emptiness and fear that they have tried so hard to hide. In this light, their betrayal is not just a betrayal of another person's trust, but a tragic act of self-preservation that ultimately deepens their own wounds. Moreover, the internal betrayal fuels the narcissist's perpetual dissatisfaction and restlessness. Because their identity is fractured, they can never feel truly whole or at peace. Their relationships, achievements, and possessions become attempts to fill the void, but these attempts are doomed to fail because they do not address the root of the problem. The betrayal of others often serves as a way to momentarily distract themselves from their internal pain or to regain a fleeting sense of power and control. Yet, no amount of external validation or conquest can heal the betrayal they have committed against themselves. This unhealed wound drives the cycle of narcissistic behavior, creating a pattern of hurt that repeats endlessly. For those who have been betrayed by a narcissist, recognizing this internal betrayal can be a difficult and complex realization. It does not excuse the harm done or diminish the validity of your pain. Rather, it adds a layer of understanding to the situation, a glimpse into the tragic nature of the narcissist's existence. They are not simply villains acting with cold calculation. They are deeply wounded individuals who have chosen a path that harms others as a way of coping with their own suffering. This understanding can bring a measure of compassion without condoning their actions. It allows you to see the betrayal in its full dimension, as both an act against you and a self-inflicted wound upon their own fractured soul. This perspective also sheds light on the challenges of healing and change for a narcissist. Because their identity is so deeply broken, true transformation requires them to confront painful truths about themselves that they have long avoided. It means dismantling the false self and facing the vulnerable core beneath, a process that is terrifying and difficult. Many narcissists resist this journey because it threatens their very survival as they know it. Instead, they may continue to betray, deny, and manipulate to keep their fragile facade intact. Understanding this helps explain why narcissistic patterns are so resistant to change, and why healing often depends on boundaries and separation rather than reconciliation. Your healing in the aftermath of their betrayal becomes a journey of reclaiming your own wholeness, even when the narcissist remains fragmented. It is a process of rebuilding your sense of trust, safety, and identity, things that may have been shattered by their actions. You learn to recognize that their betrayal was as much about their brokenness as it was about your worth. This recognition empowers you to release the burden of trying to fix or save them and to focus instead on nurturing your own growth. It frees you to break the cycle of pain and to create a future grounded in authenticity and self-respect. It is also vital to acknowledge that the narcissist's betrayal of their own identity often leaves them isolated and alone. Because they cannot be authentic, they struggle to form genuine connections. Their relationships are often superficial, transactional, or fraught with conflict. This isolation is both a consequence and a cause of their internal betrayal. It perpetuates their loneliness and drives them further into the cycle of denial and manipulation. When you understand this, you see that their betrayal is not just a wound for you, but a reflection of a profound and tragic loneliness within them. In the end, the betrayal by a narcissist is a complex and multifaceted tragedy. It is an act of harm that reverberates outward, shattering the lives of those they touch. But it is also an act of self-betrayal that deepens their own pain and fragmentation. This dual nature of betrayal reveals the painful truth that beneath the cruelty and manipulation lies a soul desperately trying to survive, but doing so in a way that ultimately destroys both themselves and others. For those who have been betrayed, this understanding offers a path to compassion, not for the sake of excusing harm, but for the sake of freeing yourself from the entanglement of anger, confusion, and pain. Your strength lies in recognizing this truth and choosing a different path, one where your identity is whole, authentic, and unbroken by the shadows of betrayal. You can heal, rebuild, and grow beyond the pain they caused, embracing a future defined not by their brokenness, but by your resilience and courage. This is the ultimate triumph over betrayal, to reclaim your power and peace even in the face of profound heartbreak. True freedom comes not from their apology, but from your own release and reclaiming of self. When betrayal by a narcissist shatters your trust and scars your heart, the longing for an apology is natural and deeply human. We yearn for acknowledgement, for the other person to admit the harm done and express genuine remorse. The apology, in many ways, represents a bridge toward healing, a sign that the wrongs are recognized and that restoration is possible. Yet, with a narcissist, this hope often leads to profound disappointment. Their apologies, if offered, tend to be hollow, manipulative, or self-serving rather than sincere acts of contrition. The truth that must be faced is that true freedom from their betrayal does not come from waiting for their apology, but from your own conscious decision to release the pain, reclaim your identity, and step into your power. This is the essence of healing, a liberation rooted not in their actions but in your own. The desire for an apology is deeply connected to our need for validation and justice. When someone betrays us, it feels like a theft of our dignity and worth. We want the betrayer to recognize this theft, to feel the weight of the damage they caused, and to take responsibility. This recognition can be a powerful catalyst for healing, offering closure and restoring a sense of balance. But with narcissists, this process is fraught with complexity because their capacity for genuine remorse is often limited or absent. Their self-focus and fragile ego make it difficult, if not impossible, for them to truly see and own their faults. Apologies, when they happen, may be used as tools for manipulation to regain control, to silence the victim, or to paint themselves in a favorable light. Because of this, relying on their apology as the key to your healing is a perilous path. True freedom begins when you recognize that your healing is your own responsibility. It begins with understanding that waiting for someone else's apology, especially from a narcissist, places your peace and power in their hands. This external dependency creates a cycle of hope and disappointment that drains your energy and prolongs your suffering. Instead, freedom is found in turning inward, in cultivating your own inner strength and resilience. It is about reclaiming your narrative and refusing to be defined by their betrayal or their denial. When you make this choice, you reclaim your autonomy and begin to restore the parts of yourself that were wounded by their actions. Reclaiming yourself means reconnecting with your truth and validating your feelings independently of their acknowledgement. It means allowing yourself to feel the pain, anger, and grief caused by the betrayal without judgment or suppression. This emotional honesty is the foundation of healing. By naming and honoring your experience, you break free from the invisibility and minimization often imposed by narcissistic abuse. You create space within yourself to heal, grow, and transform. This process can be painful and challenging because it requires confronting difficult emotions and the reality of the betrayal without the comfort of external validation. Yet, it is in this courageous confrontation that true power is born. Freedom also comes through setting boundaries that protect your well-being. Narcissists often violate boundaries repeatedly, blurring lines and creating confusion. Reclaiming yourself means asserting your limits clearly and firmly, refusing to tolerate further harm, and prioritizing your mental and emotional health. Boundaries are not walls of anger or revenge, but acts of self-respect and preservation. They signal to yourself and others that your peace is non-negotiable. This empowerment helps to dismantle the control narcissists attempt to maintain over your life and emotions. When you hold firm boundaries, you create a safe container for your healing and growth, separate from the chaos they may try to impose. Another critical aspect of reclaiming yourself is forgiveness, but not in the sense of excusing or forgetting the betrayal. True forgiveness is an act of liberation, a conscious decision to release the hold that bitterness and resentment have on your heart. Forgiveness frees you from the toxic cycle of replaying the betrayal, obsessing over what happened, and being trapped by anger. It does not mean you condone the harm or reconcile with the narcissist. It means you choose to let go of the emotional chains that bind you to the past. This release is a gift you give yourself, a step toward peace and emotional freedom. Forgiveness empowers you to live fully in the present rather than being captive to the pain of what was done. Healing and freedom also require rebuilding your sense of identity and self, worth beyond the shadow of betrayal. Narcissistic betrayal often damages your belief in yourself, your trust in others, and your view of the world. Reclaiming your identity means reconnecting with your strengths, passions, and values. It is an act of self-love to invest time and energy in rediscovering who you are at your core, independent of their influence. This process may involve therapy, spiritual practices, creative expression, or supportive relationships that nurture your growth. Each step you take in this journey is a reclaiming of your power and a restoration of your authentic self, one that cannot be defined or diminished by the narcissist's actions. True freedom also emerges from shifting your perspective, from victimhood to survivorship and beyond. It means recognizing that while you are harmed, you are not broken. You have the capacity to heal, learn, and evolve. This shift is a powerful reclaiming of your narrative. You move from being someone who was betrayed to someone who overcame betrayal. This transformation is the heart of resilience. It is the declaration that your life will not be dictated by their betrayal, but by your courage, your choices, and your vision for your future. This empowered mindset fuels your healing and propels you forward into a life of greater peace and fulfillment. Importantly, reclaiming your freedom also means releasing the need for their apology to validate your worth or justify your healing. You do not need their admission of guilt to affirm your pain or your right to heal. Your experience is real, your wounds are valid, and your healing is legitimate, all independent of their acknowledgement. This realization is deeply liberating. It shifts the source of your power from external validation to internal affirmation. When you affirm your worth and reclaim your peace without waiting for their apology, you dismantle the narcissist's hold over your emotional life. You step into a sovereignty that cannot be shaken by their presence or absence. The path to freedom is not linear or easy. It involves grief, struggle, and moments of doubt, but each step forward is a reclaiming of your life from the shadow of betrayal. It is a commitment to your well-being and your future. When you embrace this journey, you transform the pain inflicted by the narcissist into a source of strength and wisdom. You learn that true freedom is not given or taken from you by others. It is born within you through your courage to release, forgive, and reclaim. In conclusion, the freedom you seek after betrayal by a narcissist does not hinge on their apology or their willingness to change. It rests squarely on your decision to let go of their power over you, to heal your wounds independently, and to reclaim your true self. This freedom is a radical act of self, love, and self-respect. It is the ultimate victory over betrayal. The moment you realize that your peace and happiness are not contingent on their actions, but are your birthright. By choosing release over resentment, healing over hurt, and authenticity over illusion, you step into a life of genuine freedom, one that no betrayal can ever take away.